Chapter 37, Tying the Knot. Wedding invitations were sent across the world. Shamasaki, Yunika Ivce, was born in Croatia. She had a brother, Jiva, Edo, and sister Shamasundri, Ayumi. Her mother, Bhanunandini, Nagako, was Japanese. The whole family was Krishna conscious. Shyama's father, Ante, was estranged from his wife, at odds with the entire family and unwilling to attend or even acknowledge the wedding. Other members of the extended Croatian family were still friendly but unable to afford the cost of such a journey. Shyama's sister lived in the States and was able to make it to the wedding, but her brother could not. Shyama's aunt, uncle, and grandfather, Oji-san, flew to New York for the wedding. True, it was a great chance to see the Big Apple, but still a very pleasant surprise. Oji-san was the chief monk at the Kokobunji Buddhist temple near Kurume in the southern part of Japan. His presence was a great honor. My father was gravely ill and unable to travel. My mother chose to stay at his side. My Uncle Tony and Aunt Mary attended, even though he was suffering from an ailment that required him to wear a large bandage over his right eye. My brother and family attended. His young son and daughter were the only children there. Linda's mother was able to attend, but chose not to, citing a droopy eye as probable cause. This was despite the fact that all of her daughters and their spouses would be there, so transportation and company were not an issue. She was just a strange bird that had difficulty in social settings. So different than her husband, Grandpa Dan, who couldn't be kept away from a party. We flew to Jersey 2 days ahead of the wedding to help out where we could. There wasn't much for us to do. Bhanunandini was making the wedding cake from scratch, adhering strictly to whatever Christian rules apply to wedding cakes. I understand that she was quite good and that the cake would be marvelous. Vic took us to meet a few of the locals who used the temple regularly for worship. To a person, each was very generous in their praise and admiration for Vic. I realized that he succeeded in creating a real community of people who worship Krishna. They were everyday people living everyday lives in New Jersey, and Vic helped them with their spiritual needs. I had rented a minivan, so we were able to be useful by helping with transportation. It was the day before the wedding, and Shyama was going to be adorned in the best Hindu traditions, which include henna tattoos on her hands and forearms. We drove over to an artist who spent several hours applying very intricate patterns to her right and then her left. In Hindu traditions, all things start with the right. "How long do these tattoos last?" I asked her. "Just a couple of weeks," Shyama replied. "Good thing, huh? That big tattoo like that would be hard to live with." She smiled slyly at me as she used her unpainted left hand to raise the sleeve over her right shoulder high enough to reveal a monstrous full-color tattoo of Nashinga, a six-armed lion-faced guardian eviscerating an unfortunate splayed over his lap. A silence ensued. "That's the deity Nashima." I'm not pronouncing that right. Nashinga. She exclaimed. "I became devoted to him after my father was forced out of Croatia by the war. He would protect me." After the tattoo session was completed, Linda and Shyama walked ahead of me to the minivan. I saw the two of them exchanging whispers and smiles. When we finally got back to the temple, I had a private moment with Linda. I asked if she could tell me what that was all about. "Shyama had to pee, but couldn't go because of fear of smearing the fresh henna ink," Linda said matter-of-factly. I asked if she needed help, but she said no, she'd just hold it. "But that was 6 hours ago," I said in awe. The morning of October 11, 1997 was crisp and clear, a perfect day for the wedding. I had more transit duties to perform. Vic and I went to the JFK airport cargo section to pick up a shipment of flowers. Hindu weddings are profuse with flowers, mostly carnations strung into garlands, but also plenty of roses and lilies. There was some considerable confusion at the warehouse, and it wasn't looking good for the flowers, which made Vic rather uneasy. A quick Hare Krishna, and everything smoothed out as the clerk found all the needed papers and the flowers in the refrigerator. Onto the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway and into the city we went. As the flowers warmed, they gave off a soft but growing cacophony of sweet scents. Up to Times Square to pick up the Japanese contingent who were staying at the Marriott Marquis. They were all dressed in traditional kimono-style clothing. The male outfits were only slightly less ornate than the female versions. Back in the van and off to the temple in Tawako. Linda was given a pomegranate red gown to wear for the ceremony. She had a matching red sash trimmed in black that she was to wear across her left shoulder. A local family loaned Linda some elaborate golden hand decorations. We were told they were called pachangala, a jewel for each finger. The piece begins with a golden bracelet to which 5 chains are attached. The end of each chain is a ring for each finger. The center of the chain was held in place by a web of golden circles. Vic had a white Nehru-style suit waiting for me. Now I was resplendent as well. Vic gave up the saffron robes of the renunciate and donned the white robes of the householder. Surprisingly to me, he showed a lot of chest skin as the robe was an off-the-shoulder affair with very long train. His forehead was adorned with the markings I've come to ignore, but with the addition of pomegranate red bindi, a daub of color just over the bridge of his nose. His arms also bore mustard-colored markings similar to the ones on his forehead. I guess that's why his robes showed so much skin. Entering the temple from the rear, I could see the altar at the front overflowing with the flowers we snagged this morning. The temple's ceiling was not particularly high, and the room was originally intended for a more ordinary use. The ceiling was covered in dark wood slats, pretty on their own, but vaguely out of place and slightly claustrophobic. The left side of the temple room was lined with chairs. Linda, I, and the rest of the family sat in the chairs facing the center with the altar to our left. There was a very low table near the altar that was covered in flowers and votive candles. On the far side of it sat the celebrant, a man from the community and not a member of ISKCON. On this side of it there were 4 low stools. The ceremonial area was separated from the rest of the temple by flower ropes draped between movable uprights. The remainder of the temple was given to the other attendees who sat on the floor or stood around the perimeter lining the walls. The temple room, with about 75 people, was filled to capacity. More people peered in from the doors and the windows. The day was more of a part of the local congregation's happiness rather than an ISKCON event. Both Vic and Shyama's gurus were in attendance, as were Vic's guru's mother. She's a surprisingly pleasant elderly Jewish lady. The guru stayed on the sidelines and let the ceremony follow tradition. All the community members I met yesterday were standing in the crowd, joining in the celebration. The ceremony was not conducted in English, so I had some difficulty following what was going on. Some prayers were said, some incense was lit, some more prayers were said. Vic entered the room with his hands folded in front of him. He had thrown the longest part of his robes over his right shoulder, so that only his left shoulder and arm were bare. He sat on one of the stools and allowed Bhanunandini to wash his feet, cleansing him for his bride. When his feet were dried, he sat facing the celebrant with his back towards us. Suddenly, all eyes went to the entrance on the right. The bride was here. She is dressed in a pomegranate red floor-length gown trimmed in gold. She walked gracefully to the front with a matching red semi-transparent veil, also with gold trimming. She was accompanied by her maternal uncle, Motonobu-san. He was dressed in a seafoam green satin kimono and wore the traditional wooden Japanese sandals that clunked softly with each step, the only sounds heard during the procession. When they reached the celebrant, Motonobu-san lifted the veil and gave the bride away. Shyama raised her hands, folded them in front of her heart, and bowed gently. Shyama's head and hands were covered with the same pachangala as Linda was wearing. Her wrists were covered in so many golden ikatas, bracelets, that the henna tattoos were barely visible. Shyama's head and face were extremely decorated, even to the point of distraction. But somehow it worked out. She was beautiful. Her skin was white like porcelain. Her lips shiny red. Her jet black hair parted in the center and pulled back in a bun encircled with white carnations. The left side of the part was colored in bindi red and the right side in gold to signify the new marital status encircling her. Her head, like a crown, was a golden sarpash, which dangled a delicate golden emblem in the middle of her forehead. Just below was the same bindi marking that Vic wore, a series of small bindi-covered dots arched over each eyebrow in perfect symmetry. 2 lines of 17 dots each curled around her eyes and circled the rest underneath. The golden anthe in Shyama's left nostril was connected by a beaded chain to the sarpash's left side. Each ear was studded with 7 piercings, lining the perimeter of a large round golden earring that accented the flow of the piercings. I didn't think a description of how she dressed would get me so much, but I'm remembering it. Shyama looked more beautiful than any deity on the altar. Vic and Shyama sat on the small stools facing the celebrant. Bhanunandini sat to Shyama's right, slightly further away. During the ceremony, Bhanunandini would provide needed symbolic articles, things like flower petals or sweet morsels. More prayers were recited and something really caught my attention. The celebrant lit a fire in a makeshift pit on the table that separated him from Vic and Shyama. My fears subsided quickly as the flames, only embers, glowed. Bhanunandini scattered unknown spices over the embers at intervals timed with the prayers. Each application unleashed a new scent that wandered into the room and joined its predecessors in weaving a dense aromatic tapestry. This had distracted me from the actual ceremony, and I was surprised to see that Vic and Shyama had tied the ends of their robes together. Wow, so that's where tying the knot comes from. They both stood up. Vic further adorned Shyama with a garland of carnations around her neck. Shyama returned the gesture and placed a garland around Vic's neck. Vic took Shyama's hand, and the two of them walked around the fire. They stopped several times along the way to say something to each other. I later found out that they were reciting their vows, one at each pause. Now the time had come for Linda to show off her Sanskrit. She was given the opportunity to give advice to the bride. She went up to Shyama, gave her a symbolic gift, anointed her forehead with some oil, and whispered in her ear something that was the equivalent of, "Be a good wife, okay?" Shyama smiled. Later, Linda admitted she had mangled the words despite all of her practicing. Some more prayers were said, and it appeared that the ceremony had concluded. That signaled the devotees to start dancing and singing with typical abandon. The kirtan was just in front of us, and my aunt, Anita, stared in belief. The longer it continued, the louder the noise and the complaints got. Made me think of all that we've gotten accustomed to and how far we'd come. Time to get everyone away from the full-on Krishna craziness. Bride, groom, and the families retired to a yard for a photography session. Apparently we took too long. We heard from Shyama's sister that the devotees had gotten to the cake and devoured it. There was none left. Quite a disappointment. Joe's kids had shed their finery and were bounding about the yard. Time to go back to the hotel. It wasn't a traditional reception since the bride and groom wouldn't be present, but we took a private room that had a good party anyhow. Vic and Shyama spent the night at the same hotel. I had a plate of fruit sent to the room along with a pitcher of mango juice, since champagne was a no-no. It was difficult to sleep that night. The next morning, the four of us would fly to San Diego, them to start a new life, and us to finally resume the life we desperately wanted. And I'm going to have to find out why they didn't want to live at the Tobacco Temple.